In the previous section, we used a single interleaved DMA FIFO to transfer multiple channels of data. By the end of this module, you will be able to notify the FPGA VI of an event from the host VI using a Boolean flag. In this section, we're going to talk about how to synchronize the host VI and the FPGA VI. So we're going to talk about two different methods, and the first method that we'll talk about is the Boolean flag method. So you would want to use this method when you have a host VI, and the host VI needs to notify the FPGA of some event. So sometimes there might be an event that happens on the host, and then every time that event happens on the host, you want your FPGA VI to respond to it somehow. The second one we'll talk about in the next module will be interrupts. So with interrupts, it's kind of a similar use case, but a little bit different. One way you can use interrupts is when the FPGA needs to notify the host of something that happened. So maybe there's a one-time event that happens on the FPGA, or maybe it's an infrequent event, but every time that happens, it's going to notify the host, and the host can respond to something that's happening on the FPGA. These two methods, they're accomplishing similar things because they're both synchronizing the host and FPGA to each other, but it's slightly different use cases. Okay, so let's talk about the Boolean flag method. So for this particular method, the use case again is something happens on the host, and then every time that event happens, you want to notify the FPGA VI so the FPGA VI can respond to that event. So this is a very easy implementation for the host to tell the FPGA VI to run something, for example. So if we take a look at the host VI and the FPGA VI here, notice that on the FPGA VI, we have a while loop. Imagine this while loop might be executing parallel to other stuff on the FPGA. And here we have a trigger condition that it's waiting for. Okay, so the trigger condition is a control that the host can set. So every time that trigger condition goes to true, it's going to execute some code in that case structure. Okay, so imagine now on the host, we have some sort of code running, and then whenever some event happens, all we need to do is use the read-write control and set the trigger condition to true. And what that's going to do is it's going to go down to the FPGA VI and set trigger condition to true. Okay, notice that on the FPGA VI, the mechanical action of the trigger condition control is latching. What that means is when the host sends a true value down to it, the FPGA VI trigger condition control is going to read that true once, and then it's going to reset itself to false. So in other words, every time the host VI sets trigger condition to true, the FPGA VI will only execute that code inside that case structure once. So for each time the trigger condition is set to true in the host, the FPGA will execute that code in the case structure once. So let's take a look at this in LabVIEW. Okay, so in LabVIEW we've implemented something similar. So first let me open up the FPGA VI. So notice the FPGA VI, we've got a front panel and the block diagram. One thing to notice real quick is the trigger condition. If I right click on it, notice that the mechanical action is set to latch when released. Okay, that means if the host VI was to send it a true value, and it sends one true value, then the FPGA is going to read that true value, and once it reads it once, it's going to go right back to false. Okay, so if we look at our block diagram, notice that we're going to, if it's false, we're going to do nothing, but as soon as a trigger condition comes true, it's going to send in one true and execute this code once. Okay, in this case, the code is just toggling my LED. Okay, now let's look at our host VI. So on our host VI, what we're going to do is we're going to send a trigger to the FPGA. So if I'm not pressing the button, nothing is happening. And if I do press this button, then it's going to send one true here. And then we're going to send one true to the trigger condition on my FPGA VI. Okay, so let's take a look at the execution. Okay, so if I run my host VI, notice that's going to automatically run my FPGA VI for me. And I'm simulating this right now. So I'm going to hit run. Okay, so let me send a trigger to the FPGA. Notice that it's set the code to run in my FPGA VI. So every time I send a true, it toggles the LED on my FPGA. Okay, so this is a very easy way to just have some condition on the host. So right now this is just a simple trigger, but imagine this could be any sort of event that's happening on your host, right? So every time this event happens, I can set this to true, and then my FPGA VI can execute some sort of code every time that event happens. Okay? Now you can notify the FPGA VI of an event from the host VI using a Boolean flag. Next, we will notify the host VI of one-time or infrequent events from the FPGA VI using interrupts.